Thank you so much, Allison, for doing this interview with me today. I'm super excited to get to know you more, learn more about your business, and just dive right in. So, if you could just spend some time and just let us know who is Allison and what is your business about?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. So, I am a psychotherapist, trained psychotherapist, the traditional kind of talk therapy turned EFT tapping practitioner. And that is because once I got a little bit more into mind body techniques and I got trained in EFT tapping, I realized that it's really a superior mental health overcome tool, in a healing tool, I guess you could say. And so I was really excited when I found it to change my private practice to being one of only EFT tapping. And then a couple years after that, I actually experienced a divorce myself, which I wasn't expecting. I suppose nobody really is. And I started having to date again at midlife. And so when I started going out there in the world of dating after 20 years, I realized that I had a lot of insight and perspective that my fellow single women didn't have. I made a lot of female friends who were also going through the same things, and we were sharing and swapping dating stories. And I realized, like, well, I know a lot about psychology, human psychology. I know a lot about neurobiology, and I know this like really amazing tool, self help tool of EFT tapping. So I decided to kind of package it all together with my own lived experience as a midlife dating woman. And I wrote my book, Find Love Again, Learn to Date Like a Goddess, because I wanted it to be an inspiration for single women and give them some real tools to help them move from sort of negativity and dread that I noticed a lot of women I knew were experiencing into confidence and empowerment and then actually seeing dating at midlife as an opportunity.
Yeah, awesome. So you mentioned EFT tapping. So from someone who is not like really sure about what EFT is, can you dive into a little more about that?
Yeah, sure. So basically, it's a combination of tapping on one's own acupressure points with processing emotionally laden material. So what happens is when we talk about things that stress us out, we go into fight or flight in our brains. We go into the amygdala turns on, and you can see it, right? When people are talking about something that bothers them, their body gets tense, their eyes bug out, their voice gets louder, right? So you know that something physiological is going on when people are in stress. It's obvious. We see it, right? And when what research has shown is that when we stimulate these particular 9 acupressure points, which I can go over in a few minutes, but when you're actually stimulating them, it sends a calming signal to the amygdala and it essentially shuts it off. Our brains are um, kind of have like an on off switch between our what's known as our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous system. We can't be in both at the same time. So we are either in like stress mode or relaxation mode. It's on off, one or the other. What this essentially does is it flips the switch. So it will move you from being stressed to your relaxation response just by tapping on those points. And then you no longer can hold that thought in your head about the stress. So I say it's like pouring water on the fire of an emotion. And what it appears to do is actually create a new neural pathway in the brain. So suddenly now something that was really bothering you, stressing you out, you just kind of get like, I don't even care about that anymore.
Mm.
and, and it's pretty wild. And it almost seems magical, but there's a lot of science behind it at this point. They've done blood and saliva studies and EEGs of the brain, and they know what's going on in the body. It's called counter conditioning the response, right? So we all know about conditioning response. I mean, a lot of people have heard of Pavlov's dog, but you just know from experience a spider drops on you when you're a kid, and then you're freaked out by spiders the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
That's conditioned response. What we're doing with EFT is we're counter conditioning it. So you can literally tap on your acupressure points while thinking about spiders, and it will collapse that neural pathway that make you freaked out about spiders. And all of a sudden, you're just be like, yeah, that's okay. It's
Wow.
wild.
Wow, that's very interesting. So it's kind of like you're redirecting your thought pattern to kind of focus on something different.
Kind of, but you know how when you have a new thought you
Mhm.
figure something out. Maybe you're talking to a friend or you've been in therapy and you get insight and you realize, you know why I keep dating these same jerk guys? It's because, when I was a kid, I was rejected by a guy like that. And now I'm just trying to get that validation, right? So you figure it out and then you keep doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So EFT is actually that missing piece in between because it works on the emotion, not necessarily just the thought. So
Mm.
actually, if you tap when you're not feeling emotional, it's not going to do a lot for you. You almost have to be in the emotion, then tap. And then that's like, here's the emotion. Now we're going to tap, we bring it down. And then suddenly a new pathway, a new thought comes in, but only because you've shut off the emotion centers of your brain. When our emotional gunk is turned off, then we have great insight come to us. So that's how, so you do create a new thought, but you create it through the avenue of putting out the emotion.
Oh, nice. So is this something that, like, you can learn immediately to do, like, in one session, like, you can create that new pathway, or does it take, consistency over time?
Well, my answer to that would be both. So you can learn it very quickly. Anybody could go right now on YouTube and Google EFT tapping, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos. So you could say EFT tapping for fear of heights, and tap along with the video, and you will start to feel relief for your fear. It's pretty amazing. Now, if the connections in your brain with the thing that you're trying to get rid of are deep, and really rooted, particularly in childhood, then it's going to take a little longer.
Mhm.
So, two quick examples. When I first got trained, I went home the first night of my training and I tapped with my, at the time, 7-year-old son on his fear of the dark. And the next night, when I came home from my class, it had already gotten dark and he was up in his room playing and the sun had set and he hadn't even gotten up to turn on the lights.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that would have never happened before. I mean, he would have come tearing down, as soon as the sun started going down. So I was pretty blown away by that.
Mhm.
Now, a kid with a fear of the dark doesn't have probably a lot of roots to that. It's probably, so kids clear things really fast. Or I've cleared people's phobias of, I had a friend who was going on like the world's longest tram ride and she was freaking out about it, but she didn't have any traumatic history around it or anything. So we cleared that in about 10 minutes. Someone who maybe was in a car accident one time, a 60-minute session with me, we can clear all the traumatic response about that. But someone who's had multiple car accidents, that's going to take a little longer. So something to exemplify that is I worked with a woman once who had a fear of rats, and we're in Chicago, and sometimes there are rats that when you're dining outside that might kind of scoot by you. So it's not a helpful fear to have in Chicago. And so she wanted to get rid of it. And so we did tapping on it and it really wasn't budging. And I am used to getting pretty quick results with phobias. So I was like, wonder what this could be about. And I just started playing word association in my head. And I said, okay, well, when I think about a rat, I think about like a rat, someone who betrays you. And then she started crying. And then she had had a couple of really big betrayals by people very close to her in her life. So once we tapped on those incidents and cleared that out, then the fear of rats went away. So there was
Wow.
deeper roots to that one.
Yeah, so it kind of depends on how deep the trauma is with whatever the association is with a phobia or, the
Right.
stress of something that
Right.
you're experiencing. Oh,
Exactly. Exactly. And
mhm.
what I really like about the work that I do is it begins to be like a bit of a detective game. You're kind of like trying to figure out what is this connected to? Because when you hit upon the thing, the big root, it's just like a weed. If you pull dandelions off at the top, they're going to grow right back. But if you get the whole root out, they're gone. And so that's how this is. That's how this works. And once you get to the root, it's gone. It doesn't bother you anymore.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you're dealing with like maybe multiple traumas or things like that, sometimes you don't even have to do every single incident. You can do a handful of incidents and all of it will collapse.
Mhm.
So we talk about it like this. If you think about your problem as a tabletop, what are the legs that are holding that in place? And if you knock out 3 of the 4 legs, the table will collapse. So it's kind of like a fast track way of getting through some of those kinds of things. So,
Yeah.
for instance, you have a lot of annoyance with your boss. you could start to list out very specific, because we always say for results to be terrific, you need to be specific. So the more specific, the better your results. So if you list out, instead of just tapping on, oh, my boss annoys me, I mean, that's helpful and you'll feel a little better. But if you really figure out, okay, I'm going to tap on this incident when he called me out in a meeting, and I'm going to tap on this incident where he was getting on me for being late, but he's always late. So if you tap those very specific sort of legs of the table, a couple in, you're all of a sudden going to be like, you know what? I don't even care. And actually, why am I still working here? I should just go get a new job. And, those kinds of thoughts come in, and then it's easy to do. A lot of times the reason why we don't move forward in life is because we either have some kind of fear about what we're leaving, or fear of the unknown, or we have some kind of subconscious block or limited belief programming, probably from early in childhood, that makes us feel like we can't, that makes us feel stuck, that makes us feel doubt. And so when you learn this tool, you now have a tool to clear fear, to clear doubt, to clear that feeling of being stuck, that feeling of resistance. You can clear all of that with EFT tapping.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. And I love how you kind of relate your previous lifetime with your therapy and also bridging it with the EFT and merging those together. It probably really provides like a sense of like really being able to dive deeper with with the clients that you work with to really get to that root end of the problem.
Yeah, yeah, I do think it is helpful. There are a lot of EFT practitioners out there who were never licensed mental health professionals. And I think that's fine too. It just sort of depends. But if you know you have a history of trauma, then I highly recommend, and you want to work on that with EFT, I do recommend trying to find someone who also has that background, a background of, mental health and trauma knowledge. Because the one thing about it is when you start tapping, sometimes it brings up intense emotions. And the number one thing to do is to keep tapping through it. Eventually, the feeling will kind of feel like it evaporates out of your body. But if the emotion comes up, and this just happened to me, I just taught a class on Monday night, and it happened to two people in the class where we started tapping to clear something, and they got more upset. It brought up more, and that will happen because you can clear anger, let's say, and sadness can come up. So your anger could have been like at a 7 out of 10, and suddenly your sadness is a 9 out of 10, right? So it's like peeling layers of an onion. We're peeling one feeling at a time, but sometimes one feeling is masking another feeling. And so when you do that, if you stop tapping, then you just like traumatize yourself for no reason. So you got to keep tapping through.
Yeah.
So my big advice to people is think about it like brushing your teeth versus going to the dentist. Like tapping is great to make a daily practice out of, to make a regular practice out of for little things. Procrastination, I'm too tired to work out, I'm stuck in traffic and I'm annoyed. Tapping on your own is great for that kind of stuff. If you want to process something really big, then just like you would go to a dentist for a really big tooth problem, go to a practitioner for something really big. So that's my advice. But for anybody who just wants to start playing around with it, go ahead on YouTube, learn it. It's easy to learn, and you will start regulating yourself over time.
So you talked about like going through this divorce and experiencing, what tapping does for you, and then that kind of led you to the creation of this book. So let's hear more about that also.
Yeah, yeah. So what I realized was I had, and this was mostly honestly from my single girlfriends, although I had several single clients at the time too, but I saw my friends in these relationships that really didn't serve them, right? With men who maybe didn't prioritize them, couldn't meet their emotional needs, um, just weren't healthy partners. And I saw that they could see that in each other. They'd say, well, she should not be dating that guy. I can't believe she puts up with this. But they couldn't see that in themselves. And I found it really interesting, like pretty fascinating. And then I realized, okay, what is this about? Like, why are they clinging to these dysfunctional relationships? Because they clearly see it's dysfunctional in their friends' relationships. So why are they staying in theirs when I'm pretty sure their inner wisdom, an inner part, a deep part of themselves knew it wasn't good for them, right? And so it occurred to me, okay, well, it's just fear, right? I mean, there's this fear, there's this message out there that, there's no good guys left out there. All the good ones are taken. These are things that are really propagated in our culture. I mean, these are messages that we hear all the time. And honestly, they're reinforced. I had a friend recently who broke up with a guy because there was a lot of unhealthy stuff. And her friends and family literally said to her, well, I mean, he was handsome and rich. And are you sure you want to break up with him? And she was like, whoa, I'm telling you about all these emotional problems that are going on. And that's what you're saying. And so, but where does that come from? Well, that comes from their fear, right? Their fear that they don't want you to be alone forever, or their fear that maybe their own stuff, even that they kind of settled in their relationship. So if I settle, why can't you settle? Right. And so I realized that, okay, here's a tool that I have that can clear fear. And here's a really common thing going on. So the way I wrote the book was basically sort of like each chapter, I talk about a lesson or a perspective that is helpful to shift when you're out there dating at midlife. And then I have a tapping script at the end. So I talk about, this sense that there's no good men left out there. And then there's a tapping script to clear your fear that there aren't. I talk about how a lot of women have a fear of growing old alone and that they have to kind of rush into something because it feels too anxiety provoking to sit and have faith that your person is coming. I mean, that is really hard.
Yeah.
But if you tap, it becomes easier to be able to sit and just say, "Nope, I'm okay. I'm gonna wait and be okay with waiting until the right person comes along, not just any person comes along."
Yeah, no, I love that. Like when you were talking, like I have either felt that before in my own life or also have seen like those type of fears like come up with others as well. So what is the name of your book? I kind of see it in the background there. What's the name of it?
It is called Find Love Again, Learn to Date Like a Goddess.
Oh, I love that. Love that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what are like if you could what your favorite chapter of the book, if you can talk about one of those chapters that you've written in that book, that would be awesome.
Yeah, okay, so, it's okay if I cuss on here, right?
Yeah, go for it.
Because my favorite chapter, the chapter that seems to be most popular too, is called How Cinderella Fucked Me Up.
Yes. Okay, so explain.
Okay,
Yes.
so the explanation is, if you think back to Cinderella and the dynamics that were there, here's this prince standing on high, literally looking down upon all these women, a throng of women throwing themselves at him,
Mhm.
right? So it really reinforces this idea that A, there's a scarcity of men. Um, B, what are the stepsisters and the other women in the crowd doing? They're like, knocking each other out of the way. So it reinforces this idea that we are in competition with other women for this scarce resource of men. None of which is true,
Mm.
right? I mean, there's 8 billion people on this planet. A lot of them are single, a lot of them are men. And when we feel in competition with other women, it actually is really disempowering to us and it takes away our strength. Whereas when we can feel, camaraderie and sisterhood, that lifts us up and that bolsters us. And we become more magnetic when we are in that energy. And when we are in this energy of, oh, I better knock this other lady out of the way, or, to get to this guy, or I better have the best dating profile out there so that I can beat all the other women. So I'm going to, you know, be more and more scantily clad or whatever it is on my dating profile, right? When you're in that competition mindset, that's a really low vibe kind of place, right? But when you're in a high vibe place, that's when you attract people to you. And, some people I think feel like, oh, that sounds so woo woo and stuff. But the thing is like, just think about it. When you walk into a room, anywhere, a Starbucks, a meeting at work, whatever, and there's someone in a bad mood, you know it, right? You're like, ooh, stay away from that person,
Yeah.
right? And that is just their energy. That's just their energetic vibe that they're putting out there. And similarly, when you walk into a place and there's someone who's really cheery and like happy, and you're like, oh, wonder what that person has going on. I kind of want to be near that person. So that's what I'm talking about with this magnetism. And it's never more important to really tune into your own energy and your own vibe that you're putting out than in dating. And so, um, with the Cinderella analogy too, I think the most ironic thing is that in the end, he doesn't even choose any of those women, right? He chooses this woman off, staring out, not even paying attention, not even knowing who he is, and that's who he chooses.
Mhm.
And so I realized that this kind of like messed with my head in multiple ways. For one, I thought of dating from my early years, and then again, when I was on round 2, as like, I need to be chosen, right? Like, I need to show up on these dates and be pretty enough and cute enough and smart and accomplished enough and all the things, hoping that this guy will choose me. And I never really stopped to think, well, actually, I'm a chooser here too.
Yeah.
I need to walk into these dates just as discerning rather than walking into these dates trying to sell myself. Right. And it occurred to me, this is what I do on a job interview. I mean, yes, I put my best foot forward on a job interview, but I'm walking in there discerning, like, do I want to work here? And
Mhm.
I really wasn't doing that with dating. I was walking in like me, like me, like me, right? Which is not a sexy vibe. Okay, first of all. And second of all, then you're putting forth maybe not the most authentic version of you. And so even if someone does like you in that situation, it's not really the real you they're liking. And those relationships will never last if it's based on that. And then the other thing I realized that I was doing was if I was somewhere where I did see a guy that I was interested in or thought, ooh, he's cute or whatever, I would do this weird thing where I guess I shouldn't call it weird because a lot of my clients agree with me that they do it too, where I would like stiffen up and look away and and kind of like not engage. I would do like the exact opposite of what you should do when you see someone attractive. But I would kind of like freeze up, pull away, look away. And I think I was kind of in a weird way being that distant Cinderella. Like, I'm just gonna go over here and not look at him and hope that he's gonna come approach me. And like, that's not how it works. That's
Yeah.
that is a great self-sabotaging move when you're trying to connect with a guy. And so I teach in my online program this technique that I call smile like a goddess, which is when you have that happen, because we will. I mean, we'll have it happen. You kind of tighten up, you kind of look away. That's normal. That's the fight, flight, or freeze. That's the freeze part of the response. You get excited and you freeze momentarily. But the more conscious you become of this, now you can relax, take a deep breath, count to three, look back at him, smile for 2 to 3 seconds while making eye contact, which doesn't sound long, but is painfully long in this situation, and then look away. And that's it. Look at him, eye contact, smile, 2 to 3 seconds, look away. If he is interested and available, he will come approach you because you just signal to him, I'm open to being talked to. I'm open to you approaching me. And I'm a happy person and all that, right? And confident person and all of that. So it's a simple little technique, but it really goes against the grain of what most people are doing out there.
Yeah. And so first of all, I feel like I need to go watch Cinderella and dissect it and and really see how Cinderella just have completely messed up like this fairy tale life of like what it should be and how you should act. But I definitely get it. Like while you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, like I have done that like before. I've done things like that before, like the whole going out with someone and then not also thinking that, hey, I have choice in this also. That's the first thing is like just knowing that you have that choice and have done that on interviews also. Like, this is a pick me type of situation instead of realizing that, hey, I need to figure out if this is a place that I even want to work in. Is this the culture for me? Is this the environment that I want to be in? So absolutely love that you mentioned that for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It is really funny, right? It's like some of this stuff is really deeply programmed
Yeah.
and it comes from limiting beliefs. And it really derives a lot from if you believe there's a scarcity of available men out there. And I mean, I always think back to, and I never get the quote exactly right, but Harry Met Sally, which dates me a little bit, but she says something in there like, well, you're more likely to get kidnapped by a terrorist over 40 than find a single man or something like that. And it's like, that is, like, really just put out there in our culture so much, and it's just simply not true. And one of the things I also teach is this concept of law of assumption. A lot of people have heard of law of attraction. It's great. Law of assumption kinda goes a little bit further to say what you assume about your life will come true for you. And I think it's something that we do all the time unconsciously, and we just don't even realize we do. Things you assume you're good at, you tend to be good at, and that's just that, right? But when it's something that you don't assume you're good at, also those outcomes show up, right? And there's lots of research on this now and educational, material like kids who assume they're good at math are good at math by the time they graduate high school, those kinds of things. So your belief really matters in terms of this kind of stuff. So if you assume that there's limited single men out there for you, then that's what you're going to see. And if you start to assume that, hey, the world's my oyster and I'm the prize, and just assuming those things, everything's going to shift for you. And I know that it's hard to do that. So I don't want to minimize that, because when I was first single and in some of my like low places with dating, which I definitely was in, I got so frustrated with this idea of just love yourself more, just do affirmations every day. And I was like, they're not working. And that's where I really encourage people to check out the EFT tapping, because when you say these affirmations, like, I'm the prize and there's tons of men out there, if you don't believe it, you'll feel kind of sick in your body. And so you can tap on that sick feeling. And when you tap while feeling that, eventually it's going to go away. And then suddenly you're like, actually, I am a prize. Like, I am actually awesome. Like, I mean, I'm not for everybody, but for the right guy, yeah, I would be awesome for that guy. Right. And so you start to believe these things that you're trying to assume for you, and then they come true. And what's really wild is there's a part of our brain called the reticular activating system. And it's the part of your brain that's responsible for seeing and identifying patterns. So you decide you're going to buy a new car, you want to buy a Tesla, and suddenly you see Teslas everywhere, right? And you think, were those always there? I'm just now seeing them. Well, they were always there, but your brain is just now seeing them, because this part of your brain weeds out things it doesn't think is important. And then when something gets put on the list of important, pay attention to this, it'll start to factor that in, weed that back in. So if you believe that the only guys out there available are jerks, your reticular activating system will walk into a room, it will ignore the 10 guys acting nice, and it'll focus in on the 5 acting like jerks. That's how it works. So when you start to shift your belief, your reticular activating system starts to look at different guys and look for different patterns. And I have a great story about this woman who lived in a high-rise building for 8 years, and she was single and dating lots of, unsavory characters, and really decided, okay, enough. I'm going to do a lot of work on myself. She did tapping, she did Reiki, she did a whole bunch of things to really turn around her own self-concept of herself. And one day she gets on the elevator with this very handsome guy who I've seen pictures of. I feel that he's objectively handsome, and most people would notice this man, okay? Which is relevant to the story. So they start talking, and he asks her out for coffee, and she realizes, wow, like, I think I've actually changed my picker, because this guy seems great, nice and adoring and loving and supportive and all these things. And they start dating. And a few months into dating, he says to her, I've been seeing you on that elevator for 8 years, but you never gave me the time of day before.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that
So her
powerful?
that is very powerful. So for 8 years, her mind was completely unfocused to the just what was happening around her as
Yeah.
when it came to that situation, and then
Right.
it all of a sudden clicked.
Right. Well, and not only was it unfocused, it was actually focused towards toxic guys. She
Yes.
saw all the toxic good looking guys. She didn't see the nice good looking guys.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's very deep because I mean, on a smaller scale, just I remember when I purchased my car, um, I hadn't like I knew it was a car that I really wanted. I enjoyed looking at, but it wasn't until I purchased it when I started seeing them more and more on the road. And I'm like, wait, exactly what you said. Like, were they were these always here? Like, this is so wild that now that I have this car, I'm seeing a lot more of them on the road. And
Yep.
so that is exactly the
Yep. It's
reticular
true. I
activating.
remember when I first got pregnant, I was like, have there always been pregnant women? And then when I wasn't pregnant anymore, I don't see pregnant women anymore. And
Yeah,
I'm quite sure the same amount of pregnant women are out and about now as when I was pregnant, right?
yeah,
But it's what's important to you, because our brains are just too we're just overwhelmed with information all day, every day. So this is really a survivalistic mechanism that our brain has
yeah,
that's there to serve us. But it
yeah.
can work against us if we're programmed from early childhood towards the wrong things.
Yeah, I like that. And then also you mentioned your like you have a group coaching program. What is that? What is that about?
Yeah, so I have an 8-week online group coaching program where I take the women in my program real deep through all of this stuff. So there's videos, there's online exercises, there's a group coaching aspect that we do together. There's also some deep healing one-on-one EFT sessions with me, all a part of it. And it's really designed to kind of almost like reprogram your mind from week 1 to week 8. So all this stuff I'm talking about, we delve deep into to law of assumption, to kind of becoming the new version of you, the version of you that already is in the relationship of her dreams in your mind. Everything starts in the mind, right? Whoever invented the chair you're sitting in imagined it in their mind first and then created it in reality. And our ideal love life is no different. We have to create it in our minds first, and then it'll show up in reality. The problem is, I feel like a lot of people are out there teaching that aspect. The problem is, you can't create something in your mind that you have subconscious blocks to.
Mm.
So, throughout the online course, we really work with the EFT tapping to identify those blocks and clear them so that then you can start to take in and incorporate these new assumptions, this new self concept, how you are going to look and feel and experience your new relationship. And that's when you set yourself up for it to show up. And I always like to say to my clients, it doesn't matter what's on your dating profile. It doesn't matter. Don't ask me what I should chat back to this guy. No, it's all about you changing you. And then your right person, your divine right partner will come to you, will find you because you become magnetic for that. You become a match for that.
Yeah, your energy level changes. So the vibration of who you are also, like you said, changes the people that are attracted to you.
Yeah, exactly. I'll give you even a quick little example of someone in my last group who was talking about, well, I'm, going out with all these guys. She was online dating and there were like 5 different guys that she was sort of talking to and had had first or second dates with. And she was kind of trying to decide to narrow it down. And she was basically the thing most of us do, right? Most interested in the one who was sort of least responding to her,
Mhm.
right? And she said, "I don't know, should I call him? He kind of vaguely said something about going out again, but he hasn't, pursued me or approached me, so I don't know." And I said, "You know what? It doesn't matter what I say. Like I'm not going to give you advice on this." I mean, I had thoughts in my head, right? But I'm like, I'm not going to give you advice on this. I'm going to tap with you and we're going to see what your inner wisdom tells you.
Mhm.
And so we started tapping, and halfway through the tapping round, we didn't even finish the whole tapping round. And she just said, "Oh no, this is ridiculous. Why would I chase this guy? I have all these other guys interested in me. I'm not going to chase him." And poof, it went. And I talked to her months later and she was like, "Oh yeah, that guy, I never even called him again. I never even thought about him again. It was just gone." Right. So there's oftentimes these like inner child wounds that make us feel like, well, I have to get the attention of the popular kid, or because maybe we weren't popular as kids, or I have to get the attention of like someone who reminds me of my dad because my dad didn't give me attention. I mean, there's all these like wounds that can keep us chasing people who aren't serving us, that aren't maybe that interested in us, aren't maybe that available even themselves because they're just, too emotionally toxic or whatever to really even be in a relationship. But our psyche will want to chase those people because it wants to prove something. I want to prove my worth. Whereas the more tapping you do, the more you're clearing all that gunk out and you're like, actually, I know my worth and I don't need to chase. I need to just be, who I am. And that's going to draw in the best partner for me anyway.
Yeah, I love that. Like it puts you in a space of just being authentically you
Yeah,
and allowing the people that are supposed to be with your most authentic self in the space of your energy. It allows them to come in and find you. So, and
yeah,
that's without you having to pretend that you're anyone else or, trying to match what you think they want to see or who you
exactly.
think they want to be around. So,
Exactly. Yep. Yep. Because that's just never going to last, right? Because eventually you're going to go back to you and they're going to be thinking, well, I thought you were this person, right? It's like the classic of like woman who pretends she's into sports while they're dating and then they get married and it's like, I don't actually like sports, right? I mean, that's kind of like
Yeah,
a typical thing and that could cause a problem. So, I mean, you wouldn't want a partner to do that to you either, right? To pretend to be something and then turn out to be something else. So,
yeah.
it's really important.
Absolutely. Well, Allison, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for sharing more about, just you, your authentic self, and where you've been and kind of where you are now with the tapping and also the book and your program. So, if anyone wanted to kind of find more, learn more about you and who you are, where would they go?
So they can go to inspiredlifetapping.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at inspiredlifetapping to get more tips and videos from me. And those are two of the best places to find me right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I am literally about to go watch Cinderella. And thanks so much for joining. I will talk to you all soon.
Okay, thanks for having me.